welcome to Shade to Sheen, Everyday People, Extraordinary Resilience. And so this is my very first episode. And before we jump in, I want to introduce my very first and special guest, Quentin. And Quentin Singleton, as a 2024-2025 Teacher of the Year nominee with over 15 years of dedicated experience in education, Quentin brings a wealth of knowledge backed by his undergraduate degree from the University of Florida and a master's in educational leadership and administration from Howard University. Quentin is a motivational influencer who's not afraid to dive deep into the world of life, love, family, and God. His unique perspective on what humanity needs to heal comes from his rich life experiences and a genuine desire to see people thrive. When he's not making an impact in the classroom, you'll find Quentin pursuing his passion for acting. He even appeared in Black Panther 2 and as an extra in Avengers Infinity War. An accomplished athlete, Quentin has completed 3 marathons, including the Chicago Marathon, along with numerous half marathons. He also enjoys working out with the Hills for Atlanta group 2 to 3 times a week. Beyond his professional and athletic accomplishments, Quentin lives a life deeply rooted in faith, family, and values. His commitment to creating generational change is evident in how he honors his elders and nurtures his relationships as a son, brother, uncle, grandson, cousin, and friend. Welcome, Quentin. I know that was a mouthful, but I just wanted to share all the amazing things that you have done.
Thank you so much, Ayasha.
Yes, you're welcome. So I'm so excited to start this. This has been a work or a dream of mine for a really long time. So I'm excited to have you on. And also, I listed all those amazing things about Quentin, but Quentin is also my dear cousin. So I'm so excited to talk to you. I mean, we've talked a lot about just some of the things, some of this behind, right? Like off camera, we've had a lot of these discussions on healing.
Right.
And so that's what really I want to talk about today. Just to be able to share your story. Everybody's path and journeys are different, but I want to provide people with hope and encouragement when things get hard, to know that there are people, our neighbors and people all around us who have overcome some really hard things. And I really pray and hope that they're encouraged by this conversation.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ayasha, for allowing me to have this platform with you. I think it is important that we continue to share our stories to help people to kind of cross those rivers in their lives, those crossroads, and to just shine a light on mental health and well-being and being at one with yourself, as you navigate this thing called life. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm just going to dive right on in. So, today we're just talking about resilience, overcoming obstacles, and things like that. But I want to dive in and just ask you to paint a picture for me of what it looked like for you growing up as a kid. Like how was that? Like how was your early years growing up?
So I grew up in a town called or city called Daytona Beach, Florida, which is Central Florida, not too far from Orlando, about 45 minutes east of Orlando. And I grew up in a family of love. I grew up in a single parent home. My mother had me and my sister. And so we grew up with a lot of love. My mother was a very, very, very strong woman. She established with us at an early age structure and discipline and how to behave and how to act and how we should always present ourselves. So I grew up with some very, very, very solid, a solid foundation for life growing up. as I got older, went through, schooling. My mother said, "You guys are going to college. You guys are going somewhere. You got to get out of you got to get out of my house. You guys are going to pick a school. You're going to go somewhere." And I think me and my sister, we were like, okay. And I understood that my mother wanted more for us than she had for herself. So she pushed us to go to school. And so we did. I did, and then my sister did as well. And it was in that I began to really find out who I was once I left home and went off to college and went off to school. And then as life continued, I began to learn about this thing called life.
Okay. Okay. I didn't know that. So before you went to school, like everything was fine. You weren't necessarily like, "Oh, I'm having such a horrible time." Things were okay. So you went off to school, and what happened? What started to surface? Was it a situation? Was it a class? What was that experience
Hmm.
like when you came to a place where you're like, something's not right, and what were you feeling? What tell me about that.
So I went to the University of Florida, as you said, a great school, a beautiful school, resourceful school. And what I found was that, it was a really, really big school. And so when I was looking for schools, I didn't consider that I would be in a school that had classes of over 1,000 students.
Mhm.
And so, with that being said, I felt like another number at the school. And I can't say anything bad about the University of Florida. I had a great time there, but I did feel a little isolated at times
Mm.
because the school was so big. And so, and it also is considered a PWI. And for people that don't know what that is, that's a predominantly white institution. So for me,
Mhm.
coming from a high school that it wasn't predominantly white, but it was a mixture, the University of Florida did not have a lot of diversity as far as the classes go. So I did feel like I was alone in a sense. And it was kind of difficult for me at times to kind of establish a community of friends there because the school was predominantly white. Again, nothing against the University of Florida. I think it's a
Mhm.
great institution, but now I have to figure out who I am in an environment that I'm not familiar with. And I think that brings a lot of challenges because then you start to compare yourself.
Oof.
Should I be here? Do I belong here? Am I good enough? Why isn't anybody talking to me or communicating with me or
Wow.
engaging with me? So I felt that isolation, which again was very different from Howard University in Washington, D.C., which is an HBCU, where I instantly had a sense of connection like day one.
Wow. Okay, okay. So you're trying to navigate school, which is hard in itself, and then you're dealing with this on top of everything.
Right.
Did you deal with some of this then, or did you push it off and say, "I just need to focus on school and think about that later"? Or did you have to start tackling some of those questions in school? And if you did, how was that process? How did you do?
No, I believe, Ayesha, that because I was so young at the time, 19, 20, 21, 22, it was all about getting the job done. I was there for a reason, and it was about, finishing school and graduating. So I didn't really deal with those feelings that you're mentioning of. I didn't really, I kind of brushed them to the side and just said, well, I'm here for a job. I got to do what I got to do. And I did that. And so I never addressed those feelings. And I think that, again, because I was just so young and maybe I didn't have a sense of self yet. I didn't even know who I was at
Right.
that age. And so I just kind of pushed through. So I never addressed those things. But as I got older and now I'm in my 40s, looking back, I thought, wow, I didn't have any idea of who I was navigating, again, this thing called life. But now there's an awareness now because I am
Yes.
older and I'm more reflective now than I was then. So no, I didn't deal with those feelings at the time.
Okay. So let's fast forward, right? You graduated. Let's fast forward to the point where they really started to come up. These feelings of
Mm.
were the feelings similar? Like where you had to start looking in your past and saying like some there was a crossroads, or I would imagine there was a time when you're like, again, something's off balance. What I didn't deal with in college, I am now faced with now.
Yeah.
And what were the challenges and how did you start to address those?
So I graduated from the University of Florida in 2005. And what I will say is that I did not cultivate the degree that I got, which was in biology. I really didn't cultivate it, meaning that once I got out of college, I didn't know what I wanted to do with that degree. So basically, I set it up on the shelf. And so I decided to go into education. I started to substitute, and I was, substituting for a while, and then I decided to actually pursue a degree or a certification in teaching, which is what I've been doing for the last 20 years now. But it was in the beginning stages of teaching where the state of Florida experienced a lot of budget cuts. And, the first ones hired are normally the first ones fired. And so this was again after I left Florida. And so I went into a state of depression because I was cut from teaching in my first year. After that first semester, they let me go. And so then I had to face myself. I ended up living with family members at the time, and I just had lost a lot of hope in myself.
Mm.
And I went into this deep, deep depression. And it was in those moments where I felt like, and I mean, I must speak from, my heart when I talk about God. I
Mhm.
felt like God was reinventing me. He was recreating me. And it was almost like he was saying, this mindset that you had, that you have grown up with, whether you saw images on TV, whether you've been taught to by your family, I'm going to challenge all of those expectation ideas that you had about yourself. And I'm going to strip you of everything that you thought you were supposed to have at the age of 24, 25, 26. I'm going to take everything away from you because I need to speak to you. I need to talk to you. I need to take away all the noise, the jobs, the income, because I need to reinvent you. And so that was a low point for me because I had nothing. The only thing I had was the voice of God in those moments. And that is when I begin to have a sense of self. That's when I begin to say, okay, God, this is not, you allowing this to happen to me for a reason. You're trying to recreate me, reinvent me, make me better. So I will say losing that teaching job was probably the lowest point in my life. I think that was probably the lowest because even now I haven't experienced anything
Mm.
like I've experienced then. But I think that was God saying, I'm trying to get you ready for your future. So I have to, in a sense, wean you now. I have to separate you from the rest now. So that was probably my lowest point, and I think again, what helped me was my my trust and faith in God because
Mhm.
that's all I had was him at that time. And
Mhm.
I remember going to church. I remember going to the
Mhm.
altar every single Sunday because I was like, God, I'm praying for a job. I'm praying for,
Mhm.
financial, increase, all those things that I did not have. And God was saying, I have you here for a reason. And
Mhm.
so my church members were rallying behind me. And I think we should always be willing and ready to share our stories, our testimonies.
Mhm.
Everybody should, because that is what helped me was everybody saying, wow, I went through this. Let me show you what I did to get out of it. Let me show
Mhm.
you what helped me. Let me show you what God did for me in those moments. And so that was like, okay, God is saying, I'm helping you through the stories of others. And so then I begin to build more of a stronger faith and connection to God. And I said, okay, God, you're doing this. It's not me. You're allowing this to happen to me for a reason. And so that was where my growth began. And this was because I think I had to be about 24, 25 at that time. But that is where I begin to say, okay, God, you're allowing this to happen to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I could definitely relate to a lot of that. And something that stood out to me was what you said about I had all these ideas of what I thought I needed to be, and I wasn't that. Can you talk about what some of those ideas were that you didn't even realize that you
Oh,
felt like you weren't living up to at that point? Those expectations that those
Mm.
invisible expectations that you didn't know about until you
Oh
lost the
my
job?
gosh.
Can you do
Well,
you, I don't know if you recall some of those expectations that you remember going through and saying, "Wow, I am not where I thought I would be or where I thought I
uh,
expected to be."
yeah, and so I go back to expectations. I go back
Mhm.
to being a young African American male, being told you
Mm,
got to go to college, you
okay.
got to be a provider, you got to be
Mhm.
strong, you can't cry, you got to be this image of what a man is, which who knows what that is, but society for me at the time had created this expectation. And so I feel like anytime in our lives when we don't meet that expectation,
Mhm.
then we fall into a like a sinking hole in a
Mhm.
sense when we don't feel like we are meeting where we should be in life or where society thinks we should be. And so I think it was those images of what a man was
Mm.
and that I did not meet that criteria because of the situation that I was going through. And
It's
so I
interesting.
think again, watching TV, being on the computer, oh, a man should have this salary, this amount of money, he should be married at a certain age, he should have children, he should have this kind of degree. So you should be driving this kind of car. And I was measuring myself
Ah.
up against that. I measured my worth and my value up against those images. And so
Mm.
that is where the depression came in. That is where the
Mm.
sadness came in because I was trying to meet an expectation of what the world said I should be. Yeah.
Wow. I have two questions coming after that. Wow. Okay. Tell me a little bit about, I don't know if this is going to be hard for you, so if it is, like, I apologize, but what, because I want people to understand, like, what depression could look like and and I know from some of my research that I've done, depression can look different from when you're comparing maybe a white male to a black male, when you're comparing black people to white people. A lot of studies have been done as far as depression is and mental illness. They have been done on white males, and so now we're coming to a point where we're learning that depression and anxiety and these challenges, these mental challenges we have, can look different for Black people. Can you share a little bit about what that felt like going through depression, what that looked like, your days? Was it, yeah, I don't want to add anything. I just want to say, can you share a
Yeah,
little bit about what that felt like to be in a deep depression?
cousin. And when you're in a place like that,
Okay.
you really need some people around you that are going to be anchors. You got to have anchors. And I will say in those moments, I had a lot of family members who were not anchors for me at the time, which was
Oh,
surprising
oh.
because I needed anchors at that time because it was something I had never been through before. And so you will learn those true relationships when you are going through a state of depression like that. So for me and my experience with depression, um, a lot of I was very um, I was always very tired. I think
Mm,
very, very tired. Didn't have the energy or the motivation to do anything, go anywhere, be with anybody.
mm,
Um, there was also a lot of tears. I shed a lot of
mm,
tears in those moments. You feel a sense of you feel alone. You feel like you don't know who to talk to, who to trust, because I came up in a family where we never talked about
mm,
feelings like that. So a lot of this is genetic. A lot of this is systematic.
mhm,
That when you're going through something like that and you're sad and you're crying and you have anxiety,
mm,
you don't have anybody to talk to in your family because they were taught to cover up
mhm,
how they felt. We just gonna go on. We're gonna pretend like it just never existed. So I think I was struggling with that system of being brought up in an
mhm.
environment where you didn't talk about it. You just went through it in your own way. So for me, it showed up as feeling alone.
Wow.
I was very sad. I was always tired. I would just, stay in the bed, wouldn't get out, didn't feel like I had a reason to live. I never thought
Wow.
about committing suicide, but
Mhm.
I didn't feel like I had any value. I felt worthless. I didn't feel like, because again, my life was all dependent on what the world said I should
Mhm.
be at that level. So I felt like if I don't have that, then I'm nothing. I'm nobody.
Wow.
So for me, it was just a lot of dark days, which came
Wow.
in tears, sadness, anxiety of, how am I going to keep my cell phone bill on? Like I don't have any money to pay it. So in those times, you really got to have some people who are anchors for you, like who are going to be with you. So I can name a few people who I will say, um, they were there, with me as I went through that transition. You were definitely one of those people that knew my struggles in that moment, and I really appreciate you for that. My sister Chloe, who, I can't say enough about, what she did for me in those times.
Wow.
My grandmother, I can't say enough. My mother
Mm.
also, I cannot say enough about what they did for me in those times, which kind of was an anchor that brought me out.
Wow. That's incredible. Something I notice about the people that you just mentioned are all women. How does that, I mean, does that mean anything to you? Does that say anything to you
Yeah,
about,
yeah,
wow, what do you think about that?
yeah.
I just noticed
Um,
that. Like as you were naming people, I just noticed they're
mm,
women.
yeah.
What do you think?
That is a very interesting
Yeah.
aspect, because
Yeah.
in our family, the women have always been the leaders.
Yeah.
They have always been in the forefront. And we do have men in our family,
Hmm.
but they weren't as present. They didn't really have much of a place and a position. And maybe that was because they were always working, they were always busy trying to be providers. But I will say the women in our family were the leaders. So for me, I don't really know how I internalized that as I
Mm.
was going through my own journey with, depression and sadness, that women were the only thing that kind of came to my rescue in a sense. So I don't know if I can articulate, what that felt like not having a male there.
Right.
I guess for me, it was just, I'm going to push through. I'm going to take the help that's been given to me, and I'm going to keep moving. And I guess at the time, being so young in my early 20s, that I guess I never really
Mm.
reflected on a male being in that, place to really support me. So I guess that was something I just never addressed,
Yeah.
within myself. Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious. I was just curious. So that thank you for sharing that. Um, Really powerful, and thank you for sharing all the details about what it feels like and what it can look like to experience depression. I really, really appreciate that. My next question is, so you're in this deep state of depression and you have your anchors. What did it start to look like to come out of that depression? Did you do anything specific to start coming out and saying, hey, I don't have to live up to society's expectations? Were there specific things you were doing to help you get out and to say, no, I'm different. God says I'm different.
Yeah. I remember being in church, and like I said before, I was going up to the altar every
Mm.
single Sunday. And I know people were like, he going up there again? He's up here again for prayer. I was always in the prayer circle every Sunday. And I mean, I know people got tired of me walking up there. And so I went up to the prayer circle again one Sunday, and an older lady came up to me, and I think she was going through her own, journey. She was an older woman, and she looked at me and she said, "Son, you have everything you need
Mm.
to get to where you want to be." I'm like, "What?" So you're telling me
Wow.
what I'm looking for,
Mm.
what I'm searching for, I have it already. And that was hard because I was like, where is it?
How?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't
How?
know what. And it took me a long time to understand that you have everything you need to get to where you want to be or to be what you want to be. And so again, I had to figure out what that meant. And so people around me were talking about, I should do this, I should do that. Why don't you consider this? Why don't you consider that? As far as trying to be a better person, a better self, better person for myself. And so I remember my grandparents, who were educators. They said, if you're seriously wanting to be a teacher, you've got to go through the process. That means you got to take the test, you got to pass all the tests, and you have to take the education courses needed to be a fully certified teacher. If you want to be a teacher, that's something that you're interested in. And so in that moment, I started on that journey of, okay, I'm going to give this all I got, because there was another thing that God told me. He said, what do you have to lose?
Mm.
What do you have to lose? You're already feeling like you're at the bottom of the barrel. So what can you do
Mm.
now that's going to cause you to be even lower? What do you have to lose? So it was those two things. The lady telling me that I had everything I need to get to where I want to be. And God said, what do you have to lose?
Wow.
And so as I started to pursue this education certification and take these education classes, again, with the help of my anchors, my sister, my grandmother, my mother, my grandparents who were school teachers at the time, then I start to realize I got to use education to get me to where I want to be. I've got to use it. I've got to use it. And I did. I ultimately did. It took me some years, but I finally got fully certified in education, and I began my journey as an actual certified teacher. And so then Atlanta, Georgia came into the picture, where someone said, hey, you ought to move, you ought to try something new. And so I know I'm kind of jumping a little bit, but
You're good.
it was in that moment where I realized, what do I have to lose? I've got to make a better life for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have to realize, even when the woman was telling me you have everything you need to get to where you want to be, you have to also realize in that moment that sometimes you have gone past your season in places. And sometimes God uses certain situations to move us, to say, you've been here too long.
Mm.
It's time for you to move to greener pastures or a larger territory. And so getting this education degree, then someone said, hey, you ought to consider Atlanta. Atlanta? I don't know anybody in Atlanta. I'm going to move there with no family, by myself. God is saying, what do you have to lose? And I will tell you this, Ayasha, it was in that moment when I started to pursue education, then I started to pursue Atlanta, Georgia. My life changed, because once I left Florida in 2014 and moved to Atlanta, Georgia, my life was never the same. I will honestly say that my life had changed forever for the good. And I realized that God was saying, sometimes you have to be careful what you ask God for. You have to be careful in your prayer life. You have to be careful what you're asking God for, because when you ask God for something, you can't tell him how to give it to you. You can't
Mm.
tell him how you want it to receive it. You got to say, okay, God, whatever happens, whatever you take me through, I know I'm gonna be okay. You're gonna take me through some stuff because I've prayed to you for something. God, I
Wow.
want a better life. God, I want better for myself. God has said,
Mm.
okay, are you willing to lose your job for it?
Oh, wow.
Are you willing to go through depression?
Mm.
Are you willing to go through your family members disowning you, walking away from you? Are you willing to go through this feeling of, I'm not good enough because I don't meet the world standard? So we got to be careful what we ask God for, because
Wow.
God is going to say, I'm going to take you through it, and you can't tell me how you want it to receive it. You
Ah.
can't tell me how to wrap it. You can't tell me what kind of bow to put on it. You can't tell me what kind of box to put in it. Are you ready for what you're asking me for. And so I think, cousin, as I look back in reflection, I thought in that moment I was asking God for something. And sometimes, cousin, because we're human, we forget what we ask God for.
Oh yeah.
Why am I going through all of this? Why am I experiencing all this? God is saying, did you forget? You asked for this.
Wow.
Now you can't tell me how to get you to what you've asked me for, to get you
Right.
there. And so I think, I mean, again, in my early 20s, I couldn't have articulated that like I can today. I had no concept of that. But God is saying I had to take you through that. And so it was in that moment of transitioning from Daytona Beach, Florida to Atlanta that God was saying, I got to move you. You got to leave your family. You're going to have to leave your friends. You're going to go into a city that you don't know anybody. But I have to get you to that what you've asked me for.
Wow.
And that is
Wow.
when life really took off, and it was never the same. It was never the same. I will honestly say my life was never the same after that. Yeah.
Wow. Something that I really admire about you is your reverence and your faith
Mm.
in God, your dependence and your absolute trust. I think it's
Mm.
something hard to do, but from what I'm hearing, it was something deep inside, like just perhaps
Mm.
as God, where you're like, what do I have to lose?
Right.
All I have is God to depend on. So I'm already, you know what I mean? I'm already at the bottom. I have nowhere, I can't go any lower. And so you
Right.
put all your dependence in God. And I really admire that about you. And so here's my question for you that I'm curious about, and I know other people are too, is that it seems like you hear from God a lot. But what I want to know is, how does he speak to you? Is it through his word? I know, for instance, it can be
Mm.
through other people, like the woman you said at church. Hey, you already have what you need
Right.
to be where you want to be or where you want to go. But can you describe how God speaks to you? What is that experience like? How do you know it's God?
Wow, that is a very. I'm smiling and I'm laughing because that is almost hard to explain.
Oh,
It's almost hard to explain, but I'm going to do my best
okay,
to articulate it how it's coming to me.
okay,
So, I grew up, my grandmother was big on church. I grew up in the AME church back in the early 90s. Grew up in AME. We were there every single Sunday. And so I will say they would always talk about going to the closet, going into the closet to talk with God.
okay.
That was like their secret place, they would call it, like a secret place, a place where it was you and God. And that's where they could hear God's voice. They would go into the closet. And so for me, I didn't hear him in the closet.
Wait, where was the?
I didn't hear,
Wait, I got
I
a
didn't hear him in
question.
the closet. I didn't
I've
hear him in the
never heard
closet.
this.
That
I've
was something that I understood that, when you wanted to talk to God, you went into the closet.
Did
You
you
went
go
into
into a
him.
literal? Was it a literal
I
closet? Wh-
I didn't go into a closet, but I can remember sometimes God, again, when I was going through that the early stages of not having a job, losing
Okay.
everything, feeling depressed, feeling sadness. And so God sometimes I feel has to weaken our flesh.
Yeah.
He has to weaken us because as long as we feel like we can do it, right? We're physically able to do it. We won't listen to what God is telling us. So I feel like it was in those moments where he was saying, I'm going to take your flesh down. I'm going to make you feel like I'm going to take you low because I want you to only have me to listen to. It
Okay.
was like, again, weaning. And so I remember being in the bathroom. I was in the bathroom one evening. And as I'm in the bathroom, I had the door closed and I was feeling really low as far as my life went. and I heard a voice, and it was so clear. It was so clear to me. And that voice, and it wasn't me talking to myself. I know, and when it's you, and when it's not you. And then in this moment, I said, this is not me talking to me. This is something else. And I knew it then. It was the voice of God saying, this is what you should do. These are the steps that you should take. When I say steps, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. This is what I'm going to have you to do now. What do you have to lose? This is the path that I want you on. And I'm just kind of paraphrasing how it came to me.
Right. Wow.
And I was shocked because I was like looking around like, wow. I hear something clearly talking to me.
Wow.
Clearly. And cousin, I started to meditate on the words that were spoken to me at the time. And it was something about those words that gave me a sense of joy. Like it uplifted me. And it's a feeling that I can't even hardly describe. But it was a warmth that came over my body after I heard the voice.
Wow.
And knowing it wasn't my voice, it was not me. And so the bathroom was my first encounter with God for myself. Now, I was raised in church from young to old, but it was until I got to that early 20s where I could hear him for myself. And I said, God, that is the prayers that my grandparents had always prayed, that they had their own relationship with God, but they wanted us to have our own relationship with God. And it was in that moment, in that bathroom, where I said, I got the relationship. Now I have it. And so now at the age of 43, how do I hear from God now?
Yes.
God has been speaking to me, cousin, through nature.
Wow. So it
His creation. So now I felt like in those beginning years, that was his introduction to me, right? But as I got older, when I say beginning years, in my early 20s in that bathroom, as I got older, now I'm starting to see God in everything.
Wow.
In every way, in nature, in people. I'm seeing him come in different ways now. And that's because of my maturity in God now. And so I sent out a video on Instagram to some of the people. I don't think I didn't send it to you, but I should. I need to. But I sent it to a lot of my family, a lot of friends. And I was in a space where I had a clear mind. And I saw this video on Instagram, and God spoke to me through the video. It was a video of, it was a beach setting. And there were these fish. They were large fish. I don't know what the name of these fish were, but they were herding smaller fish towards the shallows of the beach. And the reason why they were doing that, because they know if those smaller fish get into the shallows, that they will be vulnerable and easily eaten by the larger fish. So the larger fish were all, in a sense, working together to chase these fish towards the shallows so that they could eat them.
Oh.
And so as I'm watching this video, I see a bird. As these fish, larger fish, are chasing the smaller fish towards the shallow, and as these smaller fish get, beached on the sand, the bird is right there to grab some fish for himself. And in that moment, God was speaking to me, saying that bird was in the right place at the right time. That bird knew that he had to be at that spot at that time to be able to feast from those smaller fish being beached on that sand. And so I thought, God, what does that say to me? That says the reason why we don't have what we need in this life, the reason why we have not accomplished and not achieved, because God is saying you're not ready. You're not in the right place at the right time. You're not ready. You have to be ready. We want all these things from God, but God is saying you're not ready. That bird was ready. He knew that watching those fish, those larger fish, herd the smaller fish to that area to where they would be in the shallows and be beaching themselves. He knew that he had to be ready for that. And that's what God's saying. Sometimes I have to be reflective of myself. God, why didn't this happen for me? God is saying, you're not ready. Have you done what you needed to do to be ready? And we should always, cousin, we should always be ready, be getting ourselves prepared for what God has for us. And that's simply why we don't have it, because God is saying, you haven't done the work. You're
Wow.
not prepared for it. You're not ready to receive it. It's like
Mm.
giving your son Lincoln the keys to a Mercedes Benz. He's not ready. He's not there yet. And so I learn now through nature. Nature teaches me a lot about me and myself and my
Wow.
relationship with God. And God is saying, I'm going to teach you through nature now. Okay, God, I'm ready to receive that. That I'm not ready. That's why it hasn't happened. You know, we
Wow.
want all these things in life, but what have we done to be ready to receive it? That bird was ready. That bird knows I have to be on this beach this time of day. And I think this was a morning time, and I got to wait for these larger fish to chase these smaller fish towards the beach so I can be ready to eat. And so that is how I learn now. That's how I talk. That's how God speaks to me now, through nature.
That's incredible. So does he still talk to you like the other ways as well? And then, okay,
Absolutely.
so it's
Yeah.
still that way, but then also through nature.
It's more
Wow.
advanced now. I think it's more advanced.
It's more
It's more
advanced.
advanced. Yeah,
Wow.
it's more
I
advanced.
remember you telling me years ago, the concept, I remember you just describing like, hey, like I want to be diligent with what I have now, because if I'm not, what would make me think that I'm ready for something else that
Right.
God has for me? If I'm not diligent with my body and my health and my wellness, if I am not taking care of my finances, all these different aspects. I remember you specifically saying, like, I have to get ready. If I want something better, take care of what I have now. Take care of the car that I have now. Maybe it's not the car that I would like, but take care of all the things I have now so God can see, hey, I'm taking care of the little that I feel like I have. So hopefully later he would bless me with different things. And so I remember you, I just wanted to make a note of that when you were talking about how he speaks to you before and being ready with the illustration of the bird and the beach. I just remember you talking about that years and years ago, and that's something that has always stuck with me, is taking care of what we have instead of wishing and what will we do if we have this and that. It's like, what are you doing with what you already have?
Right. That's right. And I believe, in this life, we have to be content
Mm-mm.
and not always chasing the next best thing.
Ooh.
I think about technology, and you know this because you're into technology. That technology changes and correct me if I'm wrong, every minute, every 2 minutes, I got an iPhone 16 right now, but they've already
Right.
come out with the iPhone 18. So,
It's
and I
crazy.
think, and I think that's just the world that we live in, like saying that what you have is not good
Hmm.
enough and you got to go after the next best thing. And sometimes we have to be content and say to ourselves, I'm going to take care of what I have. I'm
Mm.
going to be happy with what I've been blessed with.
Mm.
I'm good on what I have. It's okay to want more,
Mm.
but sometimes we have to be content with this because the world is going to continue to move the goalposts and say, you need
Uh-huh.
this, you need this, you need
Oh
this, you need
yeah.
this, you need this, you need this. And so we're continuously trying to, again, let's go back to what I said, like a full circle moment. Let me go back to what I said earlier about meeting the world's expectations.
Oof.
And that goes back to how I felt. And so that I think we have to be careful because we are living in a world. We're not of the world, but we live in it. And the world says you got to be here, you got to be here, you got to be here, you got to be here. And here we are here feeling like, and we're
Right.
trying to, but
It's
not
exhausting.
realizing we are chasing
Our
a
tail.
cycle, a cycle. And we know about a cycle. A cycle is never ending. And we have to know, and that goes back into
Mm.
a sense of self. Okay, I'm good enough. I don't have to be this. I don't have to be that. I don't have to get the next best thing because in life, sometimes we'll never get that. So it has a lot to do with being content and being happy with self. And I think once we realize that, we will be better for ourselves. and we would be better for the people that's around us.
Wow. That's a hard one though.
Hard.
I
It's
will
hard.
say you're right. You're right.
Hard.
But being content, because when we leave here, we can't take none of this with us
That's right.
anyway.
That's right.
But that is
That's right.
so hard to
Yeah.
live by. Especially now, I feel like it's harder now than it was years ago with social
Yeah.
media.
That's right. That's right.
We talk about that a lot, but you're right. Learning how to be content and being, I don't want to say grateful, but yeah, grateful and
Right.
being happy with what we have, being okay
And
with what we have.
yeah, and social media plays a big part in that because social media, to
Mm.
me, is not realistic. Everybody's putting their best pictures up there. They're putting their houses up there. They're putting their cars up there. They're putting all these things up there.
Yeah.
And if you're watching that and you have any insecurities in yourself about anything, when you're watching that, it's telling you you're not good enough because you don't have this life. But we have to realize that social media is not realistic. And that sometimes is a platform where you have some of the saddest people on
Yes.
there looking for validation
Yes.
from something that's not real. My sister Chloe sent me something the other day of a gravesite with people's
Oh.
tombs, like people's tombs at the gravesite. And some of the tombs said, I worked hard to get 25,000 followers. I worked hard at getting a six pack
Oh.
of abs.
Oh.
That's the only thing the tombstone said. Those people worked so hard to get the followers, to have this certain body, right? But had no sense of self because that's the only thing that they wanted. They wanted, right now I got maybe 500 followers. I'm content with that
Right.
because I don't know 25 million people. I don't want to know 25 million people because 25 million people are not going to be there for me in my lowest moments in life. So I'm okay with who I have on there. But the world says you should have more than that. You
Mm.
should have but I go back to sometimes we have to be content and continue to enjoy just the basic things of life, which is our family members and our friends,
Mm.
appreciating them more and not trying to get the next best thing because you'll never get it. It's never ending.
Oh, you are so right. It is never ending, and it's better to realize that now versus suffering and then figuring out later. Wow. Okay. So you have been through a lot. So here's my question. Everybody's journey is different, and what I mean is, when they realize, hey, life has these expectations and now there's a conflict because something has happened, right? Like you said, the event that happened is that you were laid off, and so something happens and it makes you question everything. And you had amazing anchors, but what would you say, how would you help someone um if they don't feel like they have those anchors, or what could someone do to start? Like there's a conflict. I don't feel confident. I don't feel that like you said, I don't bring value. I'm not valuable. I have nothing to offer. I'm at my lowest of lows. What would be your encouragement to someone else who is just experiencing a really hard time in their life? How do you even get started when you don't even want to get out of bed?
Yeah. I would tell people, this is what I would say. I need you to not ignore those feelings.
Mm.
I need you to address those feelings of sadness. If you need to cry, cry.
Mm.
If you need to feel whatever that feeling is, don't disregard the feelings because I feel like we were taught
Okay.
to not address those emotions.
Yeah.
And so I would say, sit in it, feel it, feel
Mm.
everything that you need to feel.
Mm.
But I would say you can't stay there.
Okay.
You can't stay there. Stay there for a day. Okay. Maybe two. maybe 2 days. Don't disregard those feelings of sadness. But I will say, in those moments where you feel that as you're going through that sadness, I want you to think about something that you can do for yourself that can make your time to make your life better. So there's always
Mhm.
something that we can find that makes us happy, that makes us smile, that keeps us
Mm.
grounded. Take your day, because honestly, feeling sad is not going to change it. Feeling depressed is not going to change it. And we have to realize, so I say take a day or take 2 days to do that. But then the next day, I need you to get yourself up, take a shower,
Mm.
wash your face,
Mm.
put on some clean clothes, and I need you to go for a walk. Just get
Mm.
up and go for a walk. I don't want you to be out. And when you go for this walk, I don't want to. I don't want any noise to be around you.
Mm.
I don't want any noise. I don't want any distractions. Just go for a walk, and I want you to just observe what's happening around you, because it's in that God is going to speak to you and tell you what to do next.
Wow.
So it's almost like I want you to remove yourself from your bedroom, from your house, and I want you
Yes.
to go outside. You got to get out of that environment.
Mm.
Okay. I want you to clear your mind, and I want you to go for that walk. And I
Wow.
want you to just watch, look at the birds, look at the trees, look at your neighbors, look at the cars look
Mm.
at the person on the bicycle. And I just want you to look and observe
Mm.
and watch God speak to you through that.
Mm.
And you'll find that you're going to forget all about what you're going through. You'll find that it's almost like you have to remove yourself from that situation, though. Get yourself out of that house. Get yourself off the internet. Get yourself off of your bank account. You get
Mm.
rid of all of that stuff and just get up and go for a walk to
Wow.
clear your mind and watch God speak to you. Get away from the TV. Get away from
Mm.
your social media. It's almost like you have to wean yourself from all you have to get rid of all the noise and the distractions of
Wow.
what this life is telling you you should be.
Wow.
And so I will say but I will say don't disregard your feelings. Take a day to sit in that sadness, feel
Mm.
it. But then the next day, I need you to get up.
Mm.
I need you to go for a walk and just observe. Just look around and watch God speak to you in those moments. And watch and I want you to feel how encouraged after he speaks to you, how encouraged you're going to get about your situation. You know, one of the things that I enjoy, and I know you brought this up about me running a marathon. You brought that up.
Yes, I did.
And marathons, and I'm tying this to your question. And one thing about marathons, there is a place in that marathon. A marathon is 26.2 miles. And there's going to become a time in that run where you're going to hit something called a wall. And in that wall, that is where your body shuts down. And
Mm.
your body is saying, I know you signed up for 26.2, but your body's going to say, I'm done at 13.2. And you still have 13 more miles to go. And so it is in that moment,
Mm.
cousin, where it's no longer physical.
Mm.
It's here. You got to be able to tell yourself here that you can do 13 more miles, even though your flesh is saying you're done at 13.2. And so
Wow.
I can run those marathons. When I used to run those marathons, cousin, I would see people who were without arms, without legs.
Wait,
I'm
what?
trying not to get up. Without arms, without legs.
Wow.
Trying not to get
Without
emotional.
legs?
Trying not to get emotional on this thing. Without arms, without legs. Maybe they were in wheelchairs in
Okay.
those marathons.
Wow.
And so what does that tell you? What does that tell me? It's not about what they're going through. It's not about the situation. These people have no arms and no legs. Don't we probably think that they were sad, depressed, emotional about their legs and arms being gone? But they are in a 26.2-mile marathon. And what does that tell me?
Mm,
It's how you see it.
mm.
It's what you see. It's how you see the situation. I'm
Wow.
telling you, that is what God has always said. It's how you see it.
Wow.
Because
Perspectives.
I truly believe I'm in the best shape of my life. That I can run, I can jump, I can do all these things. So the person next to me that has the prosthetic legs, because they don't have real legs of their own, or they got amputated, is running next to me in a 26.2-mile marathon. What is it? What message is that sending to me about my life? Is that it's
Wow.
here. It's not what you're going through. It's how you see it,
Wow.
how you view it. And so take your day to be sad and feel sorry for yourself and go through all the emotions of life, but you got to get up the next day. You got to clear your mind, because there's people out there with no arms and no legs running 26.2 marathons, 2-mile marathons. That is my message to that person that feels hopeless, that feels like they have nothing, that feels like, Quentin, how did you get out of it? I
Right.
realized it wasn't what was going, it was here. I had to realize it here. People say I got, you have enemies. I tell people all the time, you don't have enemies. There's no. The worst enemy is your mind. It's what you think. How do you perceive your life? Nobody around you can do anything to you. It's how you see it. It's how you see it. We can look at the glass, what? Half empty
Or half
or
full.
half full. It's how you view it. And so that is one of the things I love about marathons. That is what marathons taught me. It's not because I do love running. I will say I do love running. I love the medals that you get at the end, but it's that journey that you're taking where you're watching people around you, maybe a lot heavier than you are, maybe a lot older than you are,
Wow.
maybe with no arms, no legs, but they're out there because they recognize that they're just as good as everybody else around them, and that they don't have to let the loss of their limbs define who they are.
Hmm. I love that so much. That is
Yeah.
so encouraging. I really do hope the people who see this are really encouraged by that, by your strength, by your resilience, by the things that you've gone through and butting up against, oh, the world thinks I should be this way, but God says different. And having those anchors and the women in church say, son, you got what you need right here. Like, I absolutely pray that people are encouraged by that, because now I feel like you're living your best life. Not without problems. We still
Right.
all have problems and challenges, but compared to where you were, are you would you say that you're glad that you went through what you went through, and that you took the time to work through some of the stuff in the past? And I ask that because I've had people say if they knew how hard it was going to be to go on that journey of healing, they probably wouldn't have gone on it. And I know everybody's journey is different. So I would love to know, like, knowing what you know now, would you do it again?
Cousin, I had to go through that in order to appreciate where I am today.
Mm,
And, you know, all of us have a measure of faith. God says we only need a mustard seed faith, right?
mhm. Yes.
Cousin, I got Toyota, Mazda, BMW faith.
Oh,
That's where and it's because
wow.
of what I had to go through. So now I'm more mature in God. I have more of a sense of self now. So yes, as long as we live on this side of the earth, we gonna always face something. But now I realize it's not what I'm going through,
Yes.
it's how I perceive it. How do you look at this?
Yes.
So now my faith, my walk with God is a lot stronger. So now when I face things, I
Okay.
can't go back to dealing with them like I dealt with them when I was 25 years old, because God has brought me through so many things. And I would never get to a point in my life where I look back, where I get to something now and say, God, you can't bring me out of this. God is saying, but I've already done it. So
Wow.
why get to an age of 43 years old and come up against something and you're afraid all over again? God said, haven't you not learned anything from what I brought you through at 25, at 35? Like, haven't you? And I think it's an insult to God when we get to things in our lives and after He's done all these things for us and we almost forget
Yep, we
that I
forget.
brought you through this, I brought you through that, and I'm going to bring you through this as well. So it was necessary for me to go through the things that I went through. So I wouldn't change a thing,
Definitely.
because it has made me who I am. It's made my faith a lot stronger now because of, I guess, the conditioning that God had to do with me then.
Yes.
Um, it was necessary. It was necessary that I went through what I went through. So I wouldn't change. I wouldn't change anything.
That's incredible. Thank you. I I have just thank you so much for doing this. I've enjoyed learning. I thought I knew all the things about you already, but I've learned a lot about you through talking to you and doing this interview. So I have two final questions for you. So one, if if your healing was a soundtrack, because I know for the people who don't know, you do love music, and I feel like you have an appreciation of music, and you can sing, but you never want people to know. But if your healing journey was a soundtrack, what would be some of the songs that you would include on this soundtrack? Songs you feel like maybe have brought you through, or that I know music can really speak to us in really special ways. Would there be any songs that would be on your soundtrack?
Absolutely. So there is a song by a group called Sounds of Blackness,
Okay.
and it's a pretty popular song. It's called "Be Optimistic."
Okay.
So that means be hopeful.
Yes.
That greater is ahead. Better is ahead for you. There's another song by Sounds of Blackness called "Whatever It Takes to Make It." I'm going all the way.
Wow.
Uh, I would say that one. I would also say there's a song that by the Mississippi Mass Choir
Mm.
called "I Am Holding On to the Promise," um, that God made to me. Um, and Lord, I still believe. There's a song called Hold On, Young Soldier." Even though you may be tired, you may be weary, we got to hold on to the very next day, because God can do anything in a
Mm.
day, 30 days, 90 days. So that song says to me, hold on, young soldier. Don't worry, because God can do anything at any time. And then the final song that I would add to that soundtrack is "If I Were in Control." This is by the late LaShawn Pace, who I grew up loving, a gospel singer who's passed on. The song is called "If I Were in Control, I would have worked things out differently." But that just goes to show that I'm not in control. God is in control. Because if I was in control, I would allow things to happen the way I
Mm.
wanted them to happen. But God is saying, I'm not in control. So the song is called "If I Were in Control of My Life."
Wow. I don't know all those songs. I'm gonna have to check some of those out. So thank you so much. My final
Welcome.
question is, this might be a hard one, right? But when you get to the end of your life, um, What's the legacy that you hope you will leave for those behind? Those who are still on the earth when you are gone. What legacy do you want to leave?
The legacy that I would leave um, after I have reached my expiration date on this earth is to treat people how you want to be treated. I would say um, love people enough to tell them the truth.
Mm,
Love me enough to tell me the truth. Don't make me feel like everything is good in my life. Um, I would also say always be teachable, always be willing to learn, always be willing to grow, um, always be really willing to change. All remember that things are not always as they seem,
mm,
and that it is how you view it, it's how you see it that will make the difference in your life. Continue to love,
mm.
continue to help. It's not always about us. Sometimes we get more value out of helping somebody else, giving service, giving of our time. And I would also say, I think finally, I want my legacy to be that you have everything you need to get to where you want to be.